Post Falls may recognize the couple that's on video. This was a couple that married, had some issues, divorced, and then I was able to remarry them. If I can get this thing going. Oh, no signal. I guess that's probably why.
Charlie, we're not going to make it because we got that other meeting.
Okay.
So we're
We're married in March
All right.
of '86, and I was in grad school down at the University of Idaho. We had our first son, Jesse Walker, in 1987.
Can you guys hear that okay?
Not much more than a year after we were married, and then our second son, Isaac Hunter, came along about a year and a half after that. So by the time we were done with school, we had one son, one on the way, and life was going full bore.
The assumptions I had when I married him was that he would have my best interest at heart. But what I learned after I married him is that as long as I followed the rules that were made by him, not necessarily made by God, but made by him within our household. If the kids were in line, if I was in line, if the checkbook looked right, anything we would, for a number of years, the boys and I were kind of a team. And Craig thought he was the leader of that team, but he only led us out of fear, not out of respect.
I could get big and mad and angry, and they'd get scared, and they would listen to me. And they didn't love me, but they did what I wanted. And that was that illusion of control that I needed.
I assumed you could trust someone that said they were a Christian. I assumed you could trust someone who was a preacher's son. And I assumed that, that he had my best interest in heart, because I knew I had his best interest at heart, truly. And I learned this in life. My boys became afraid of him. And I was afraid of him. But at that point, you just be obedient. You just thought, my job as a wife is to, I've never been married before, this must be how marriage goes, and everything will be cool, and God will still be honored. And really what I did was I started letting Craig rule my life instead of Christ.
That was our life. Me going to work, taking my boys places, taking my wife places, thinking I'm this great Christian husband. But whenever anything went wrong, blaming them and beating them down, and them all walking on eggshells around me. And I didn't get it.
He didn't, drink on the way home or stop at the bar or anything, but I'd have a glass of wine while I was making dinner, so I knew I could handle whatever state he came in the door. Rage, tension, just whatever emotional state he was in, that I could give the right answers. I could keep peace. The kids would be fine, because Mommy was kind of funny. So I could keep the peace in the house the best I could.
Jesse had just turned 10 years old, and we had returned from my class reunion, and he just wasn't right. He wasn't healthy. And so Jill took him to the doctor, and that's when we got the horrible news.
Our son was diagnosed with leukemia. Things got tougher for Craig, and they got tougher for me as well. But someone had to, in my mind, be the stronger one, because I knew he would react however he was going to react, and there was no stopping it. So I felt like I had to keep control somehow. So I started drinking, and I guess no one really knew knew about it, because you just drink enough to take the edge off.
My father-in-law took me aside and he said, Craig, you have an anger problem. And you're going to need to be there for your family. So I really wish you would start to address this. And I guess, you know, when truth is revealed to you, you know it. And I knew it. And so I immediately started to go to counseling.
After my son died, there were a couple real low points at his death, which, you know, I know Craig, it's hard things for him and it was hard for me, but it was after everybody left, everybody left. At that point, Craig, his effort to me meant nothing. He was helping himself. Our son was gone, the marriage was over for me. And my relationship with God, just disillusioned.
It was, the damage was done. And our goal after Jesse died was to survive a year. And I think that's everybody's goal. And once we survived a year, we didn't have a goal. And we just came down to the marriage was over.
I just found myself just not caring one bit about him or just intimacy. Everything was just done and I didn't know what to do with it. And then I moved away and my son and I tried to start a new life and I didn't talk to Craig for 2 years.
I remember I was in a counseling session. And the counselor kept saying to me, Craig, you say you're a Christian. What's your model? Isn't your model Jesus Christ? And I remember the day in that session it finally hit. Wow, look at all the harm I've caused. Yet look at how much Christ still loves me. And that's when His grace, His forgiveness just flooded into me. And I really got it.
I'd seen a movie a long time ago with Jane Fonda in it. The Doll Maker is the name of the movie. And I think if you ever want to see a perfect depiction of grief, she lost a daughter in that movie, and she went to bed, and she started drinking, and she drank, and she was drunk for probably 4 or 5 days, or a week, I don't know how long. Anyway, she was a wood carver, and she woke up, and there was a huge piece of wood by her bed, and she started carving and didn't know what she was carving, just carving at random, and still, I'm sure, feeling alcohol. And she carved a face of Christ. And I hate to give glory to alcohol, that's bringing alcohol. But I guess that's what Christ had to use in my life, to be able to carve his face back in my heart.
I had been traveling back and forth to North Dakota to see Hunter about every 6 weeks to 2 months. I'd drive back or take the train, and Joe was not wanting to have anything to do with me, so we would usually meet at Kmart parking lot, or she would have a friend drop him off, and no eye contact with her. And really, I had resolved, my focus really was him, and loving him, and being a godly father to him, and an example, and that was it. And so I really had no expectations of us.
I forgave him, and what forgiveness did was healed me. And I didn't ever plan. I called him and I just said, you know, I have to forgive you, and I don't know that we'll ever have a relationship again. I didn't plan on getting married. I didn't even plan on dating him again. But I knew for my own sanity, so that I wouldn't have to rely on anything else. I had to get my life man. And then I really felt peace.
The next time I traveled back in North Dakota, we sat down and we really had a good conversation. And that was probably a month and a half later where we just decided, you know, let's start working on things.
I was peaceful and fine, and I was healing up, and he sends me flowers once in a while, and I got better. And, you know, my heart got better, my mind got better, my life got better. Forgiveness healed me. Christ came to my rescue himself. My life is in his hands, for sure. And now whatever I have to sacrifice from here, I'll do it for what I have now. And what I have now is him. And he is sufficient, no matter what the cost.
I've just seen so clearly that we serve a God of second chances. And nothing I've done
Thank you.
is deserving of Christ's forgiveness. That's a and our reconciliation is a gift.
Do any of you know Craig and Jill? I thought you guys might. That was all. I was privileged to remarry them, I think 2 days before we made this video. And their son Hunter and his wife and 2 little kids come to church here. Hunter showed up in one of the marriage classes that I had, and I kept looking at him because the night of the wedding, he was like a teenager. He was the best man at his mom and dad's wedding that we had. And so they are pretty close to me, but there was so much hate and bitterness in their relationship, I didn't think they'd ever heal. Craig came to see me a number of times. He was in Post Falls working. Jill was back in North Dakota. And my contention was that they were too wounded to ever have a relationship again. And as she said, they started getting better. When she learned how to forgive, they started getting better. So there's hope. From time to time, I have people who come to see me. Usually they're by themselves. And one of the things that they will say to me is, I've come to help me figure out how to divorce my spouse. My answer is always the same. We aren't in the business of teaching people how to divorce. We're in the business of teaching people how to heal. And so if you've come today looking for a situation where you can have excuse to divorce your spouse, you're in the wrong class. Okay. Now, first thing I want us to do for just a moment is to list in our lifetime. I want you to help me figure out in your lifetime, from your parents' traditional relationships to the ones that are today. Let's see if we can write some things on the board how marriage has changed in our lifetime. Expectations?
Social media.
Social media? What? How so?
Distraction. Or outside relationships.
You mean like pornography?
No.
That certainly is one. In fact, we are now in a sexual revolution class. Internet has brought social media in our home. And it is at the point where in a matter of seconds you can look at someone to stimulate you sexually. And usually, most of the time, it's a guy problem. That doesn't mean the girls don't look at pornography, because many do. But social media has created some distractions. Also, we can spend a lot of time. I think this is what you're getting at. We can spend a lot of time just involved in social media, playing games and that kind of thing, so that we don't have time with each other, right? You guys know who the Duck Dynasty boys are, right? Well, old Mr. Phil, he's the grandpa, he was out, they were getting ready to clean off a field so that their family could have this family football game. They had a scrimmage game every year. Phil Robertson was the quarterback for Louisiana Tech, I believe. And so his grandkids are standing over there on their phone, and they, what are you doing with that? Well, I'm texting my friend. Well, which friend? They suggested that their friend lived across the street from them. And he and Cy, his brother, Uncle Cy, were discussing how years ago they used to sit in the swing on the porch and talk to their friend across the street. Social media has interrupted that. There's a gal who just came out with a book called How the iPhone Has Destroyed This Generation. There's some unique studies that have been done, and she suggests those in the book, that social media has taken, I don't mean to labor on this point, but since you brought it up, I'll just do that. Social media has taken kids away from having interaction with other people. It's all cold and formal, and there's more suicides with teenagers today, high anxiety levels than ever before in the history of mankind. So our suggestion is, because of all the studies that have been done, social media certainly has been a part of that. What else, what other traditions can we say that's changed?
Single parent incomes.
Say that again.
Single parent incomes.
Okay. Well, there are more single parents today probably than ever before, so I think
that wasn't what I was getting at. I mean, back when I was growing up, my father supported the family, though my mother stayed home.
yeah.
You know, and today's society is driven that both people work and the children go to daycare.
Yeah, yeah. Now, anybody want to add anything to that?
Gender roles.
Gender roles. Yep. We'll just put that underneath here. Another good book. Gal wrote a book called Alpha Female. Let's see, something about alpha female. I can't remember exactly what it is, but her suggestion is that because of the roles that gals are now possessing or having, it's difficult for some gals to take their role at work away from themselves and out of their mind. When they come home, they want to govern the house just like if they are CEO or something of that nature where they work, where they have, it's like they're running another business when they get home. And her suggestion is that God has made us so that we have masculine characteristics and feminine characteristics. And when we are focused on what our relationship is as far as our jobs and that kind of thing that we work in, we do away with our ability to just relax and be what God has designed for us to be. Does that make sense? Anybody want to have some kickback on that?
No, I have another one.
Yes?
Influence says, and as far as what's acceptable and venues that they're through, because not just social media, television has, went from the Beavers to where they slept in separate beds to other shows like Roseanne where they slept in the same bed, and so there's...
Yeah. Well, there's certainly outside influence, and that could be social media too. the same idea that we have, yes, Ms. Laura?
I was just gonna tell you, the book is The Alpha Female's Guide to Men in Marriage.
Yeah, there you go.
So what, I didn't hear that.
Guide to Men in Marriage. It's a struggle for, and some of you girls will have time or have trouble agreeing with some of the things she says. All I encourage you to do is just read with an open mind. That doesn't mean that we guys are saints, and you're going to find that out, because ultimately God's going to hold us men responsible for what goes on in our home, because I believe that's His plan. Because we're talking about God's holy design for marriage, by the way. Anything else? Well, there are lots of things that have changed in our lifetime that we will be aware of as we go through this.
Well, I would say that one significant change from like marriages today to marriages back in the 50s is that most people, when they get married, have been in other relationships when they're getting married. They're not like 18 or 19-year-olds getting married, and/or people are getting remarried.
Yeah. So you're saying that that's the change that's come about today as opposed to the 50s. You know, we traditionally, well, we went through a period in our society where we left the old traditional men being head of the house to what they call an equalitarian system, where everybody, both husband and wife had equal rights. That happened in the early 60s, I believe. And some studies have been done as to how that has affected relationships, and actually what they came up with was that there are more divorces in an equalitarian system in homes than there were before. Now, it could be, and I'll give you this, it could be that maybe you gals just suffered through it, and you did what was natural because that's the way your mom told you needed to do it, and that kind of thing, and we'll talk about that in time to come. That may be part of it. Like, for instance, in India only has a 2% divorce rate. Traditionally, when you get married there, you're stuck. You're stuck for life. So that may be the situation in our early 20th century, but that has changed to the place where, dare I make the statement that you can't have two heads of any company. That doesn't mean that everybody doesn't have their own role, and we're going to look at what God's design is for that, but at some point, God has to be the head of your family, rather than you're looking for a place to be the head and leaving God out of it. Does that make sense?
I think what's true mainly is that people have premarital sex now. They have relationships before they ever find. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that brings up an interesting thing. I'm going to do this. This is going to really shock some of you, especially you girls. Marriage was held in such high esteem when God first created it, a husband and a wife, and we'll look at that in just a little bit. That this is how marriage took place in the Old Testament. This is Deuteronomy chapter 22. And if you girls want to scream and yell about this, you certainly have the right, because it's almost like it's unfair for the girls in this situation. When a woman and a husband got married, he would, as Jesus talks about in John 14, he would, usually it was an older fellow who went out in the community and spotted some gal that he wanted to marry. They could know each other, they possibly did know each other, but they made arrangements with their parents, and he would pay a dowry to her parents. Then they would set up a time when, if she agreed, she had to agree to the whole situation. But he would go back and in his father's house, he would build an addition to the house. And when the addition was finished, then they would proceed to have the wedding back at her folks' house. And I gotta find my place here. Well, Deuteronomy 22, I'll just tell you the story. The mom would make a sheet or a blanket for her daughter, and while the party was going on, after the wedding vows were set, the bride and groom would go back to, they would go into this private place with everybody still partying. They would consummate their marriage. They would bring the sheet out, which was supposed to have blood on it, and they would hold it up and everybody would rejoice. If she brought the sheet out and there was no blood on it, guess what happened to her?
Stoned.
She was stoned. She was taken to her father's doorsteps and stoned. Now, does that seem a little unfair to you girls?
It's pretty vile. It is, because I mean, there's no proof that the man was a virgin.
Well, see,
I'm just saying.
I told you that you girls had a right to kick back here.
It's not
And not
always
every-
accurate, actually.
Yeah.
It's
Say
not
that
a
again?
completely accurate method
Right.
either.
Yeah, it's really
It's not 100% accurate.
Well, you know, it's good that you brought that up. Now tell me your first name.
Bethany. My first name?
Yeah.
Bethany.
Bethany. You know, I have a terrible time with names, so I'll be asking all of you guys your names again next year. Now, your name is Laura, right? Thank you, Bethany. I asked my wife when I was reading this, I went home and asked my wife, now, if that were to happen today, if a gal used a tampon, would that
No.
do away with?
No, but I think that everybody is different the way their bodies are made. Like every woman is different. And it might not necessarily happen for every woman that way the first time that they have sex.
Okay.
I've heard certain activities too
Yeah,
like
can
horse riding.
break it. Yeah, horseback riding.
Well, and that's what my wife said. She said horseback riding. Now, this is what I suspect, that I suspect these little Jewish girls were very careful about getting on a donkey or whatever. Because they had to protect. Just imagine this.
Yeah.
That if you go into this place to have sex with your prospective partner and your husband, and there's no blood involved, gosh, you know, you knew right away that it's over with. It's all over with but the shop. They're going to give me a building all in pieces, rocks.
They probably like make a little cut on their arm or something and sprinkle blood.
Well, you know, I was wondering about that. I wondered.
That's what I would do if there was no blood. I'd be like, heck.
Well, somehow God would find that out, I bet, Bethany. But, you know, I wondered if they would take a little vial of blood with them in case.
Yeah, probably.
And then pour it on one.
Yeah.
Well, the reason that I tell you this, and the Old Testament law was set up to help the children of Israel, who were very hard-hearted people. It was set up to help them understand that marriage vows are sacred, and they're not to be entered into lightly. And what we're talking about is that in this day and time, losing one's virginity is almost a privilege to some folks. I'm exaggerating, I shouldn't do that. All right, let's get into our book here. We are in lesson 1, and I want to go through the whole aspect of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about today God's design for conflict, and we're going to look at what I believe is that God has designed conflict in our relationship for a reason. The second lesson is God has designed His design for a relationship And then the third lesson is when design is affected, and we're going to help you figure out who you are, why you look at marriage and relationship, why you have problems with relationship. We will try to help you understand some things about yourself. Lesson 4 is the design for the couple in God's mirror, how God sees you, how you see yourself. We'll take a look at how that is compared to imitating Jesus and what we do. And then the last one is God's design for sex. And we have lots of fun in this session, but I just want you to know that I think you'll learn more in this session about sex than you've ever learned up to this point. Because we're going to take a real open look at how God sees sex. We're going to compare that to how the world looks at sex, and it'll be fun, and lots of scripture verses involved in that. So, without any questions, got any further questions about any of that? All right, here we go. Do you guys want to sit over there so you can look at me? Yeah, why don't you? Yeah, I don't want to speak to the back of your head. I want you to look at me. If anybody else needs to move or anything, you are more than welcome to do that. Let's look at God's design for conflict. Now, the first verse we have listed here is Luke chapter 20, verses 27 through 36. This is the scripture where the Sadducees, who did not believe in life after death, came to Jesus and asked him a question. And the question was, now, suppose a Jewish guy, would marry a woman, and he had 6 brothers. He passed away. Jewish tradition said that it was an honor for the brother to marry this wife of his older brother, and raise, if he had any kids, he would raise them to honor his brother. Now the question that the Sadducees asked Jesus in this section of verses, if she actually is passed down to all 7 of those brothers, when they get to heaven, whose wife will she be? Now they didn't believe in life after death. They didn't believe in heaven, so this is kind of a trick question that they were asking the Lord. And he responded by saying, neither, because in heaven there is not going to be marriage. We are not going to be married in heaven. He says we will be like angels. Now, when I share this in the presence of older folks, some of them are disappointed because, you know, most older people that have gotten married plan to be married for an eternity. They plan on being married through their whole life here, and then they plan to be married when they get to heaven. And it's somewhat of a disappointment for them to hear that in heaven we're not going to be married. So, after that soaks in for just a little bit, Emerson Eckridge says, and this is so profound, I wish I'd have said this. In fact, I thought about claiming that as something that I came up with, but it's not true. He says, since that's true, that in heaven we're not going to be married, then God has established marriage in this life to help prepare us for glory. Now, I got to tell you, class, that is rich. When I think about the fact that in the very beginning, God created Adam and Eve different. Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. And I'm going to have to move fast because we had a video today, so we're going to have to go through some of this really fast. Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. God created Adam first, and then, for the first time in the creation story, on the 6th day, he always said it was good, but on the 6th day, he said it is not good. It is not good for man to be alone. I will create a helper suitable for him. What that term means is that she takes up the slack in him. She complements him. She's different than he is. So from the very beginning, God created us different. Would you guys agree to that? God has created men and women different. Not only physically different, but in a lot of other ways. Those who were are in the know say that women are crockpots, men are microwaves. It doesn't take a very bright person very long to figure out what that means. Those who are in the know about human anatomy says that there is 20% more crook in a woman's arm than there is a man's. Wonder why? Anybody want to take a guess?
Designed for holding a baby.
We can assume that. There are lots of other physical things that we're different also. Men are hunters, women are gatherers. Is that true? Tim Kimmel, who I love to listen to, he's one funny guy. He says that when his wife goes shopping, he will go with her to a mall and she will go into 13 stores if she's looking for a sweater, look at sweaters in every store. Then she wants to come out and sit in the middle of the mall and have a latte and think about which sweater she wants to buy. He says, I want to go grab the thing, pay for it, and take it home. He says that's how men are hunters and women are gatherers. He says his wife, when she gets dressed, will have a full-length mirror, and she likes to put 14 pairs of shoes in front of this long full-length mirror. She has a dress that she holds up in front of every pair of shoes until she gets the right pair of shoes that matches her dress. He said, I'm downstairs in the clothes hamper smelling clothes to see which one doesn't stink so that I can wear them again. Does that make sense? Now, just as a little side note, a fella who is a rabbi wrote a book called The Role of the Azir. The word Azir is the Hebrew word for the word helper. And he says that in the garden, Eve really had a bigger role than when she was given the punishment in chapter 3 in verse 16. That from now on your desire shall be to your husband and he will rule over you. That's the verse, that's a part of the curse of the garden. But Eve was the provider. She was the one who made decisions about what they were going to eat. And she brought it to Adam as his helper, according to him. You can take that for whatever it's worth. See, already some of you girls think, oh gosh, I don't like where this is going. But the bottom line is, he says, that when she was talked into eating of the free tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that and she brought it to Adam, he says, this is his opinion, that Adam trusted everything that, up to that point that Eve had done for him. And he lays majority of the blame at the feet of Eve, who encouraged her husband to eat. Remember when God came to the garden and said, Adam, he spoke to Adam first, who, by the way, was responsible for both he himself and Eve. Adam, why are you hiding? And he said, what was his response? What was Adam's response? Yeah, that woman you gave me. She's the one that created this problem. Now, just so you can make application with this. You don't have to agree to this, but this is his opinion. Adam does not trust Eve from that point, maybe for the rest of their life as much as he had before. In fact, this fella says that he says to his wife Eve, you screwed me over once. You're not going to do that again. If you look at chapter 4 and read verse 2, Eve says, I prayed for another man to become involved in my life. And God gave her a son. Now, this is his suggestion. Again, don't throw rocks at me. I'm just throwing this out for you to listen to. His suggestion is that Eve completely spoiled Cain. And the reason was that she had someone to nurture because Adam had withdrawn to some degree. Now what happens to Cain? When she has another son, and his name is Abel, what happens to Cain?
Is he jealous?
He's jealous. He becomes self-centered. He's jealous of his brother who had a better offering. And God was pleased with Abel's offering. And it was not that Abel was tending the flocks. Cain raised the garden or the things of the field. And what he suggests is that when Cain saw that Abel was pleasing to God, it made him angry. And now, class, here's something that I know. The scripture says in Genesis chapter 4 that God came to Cain and says, Cain, why are you pouting? Why are you so downtrodden? Why are you angry? Why are you bitter? If you do well, he says, then this thing will be done away with. But Satan is crouching at your door trying to pounce on you like a roaring lion. Now, the fellow who wrote the book, this Jewish rabbi, suggests that Cain had been spoiled and he wasn't used to sharing the limelight with somebody else because he was answer to the prayer of Eve. And guess what? Even God was not able to talk Cain out of being angry and mad. And so what happened? What's that? He wound up killing his brother. Now, class, I think that sometimes bitterness and anger can get to the place where it completely controls us. We are possessed by it. If God, who is, we will have to give credit, is the best counselor in the whole world, if he could not encourage Cain to let go of this thing, then there was something seriously wrong in his life. And I could go through a number of people who've come to see me. They were angry at so many people. They couldn't let go of whatever was going on, and it wound up destroying them. They couldn't forgive. Remember what Jill said? What happened before her and Craig started working things out? What happened in her own life? Remember? She forgave him. Her counselor encouraged her, you're being possessed by bitterness and anger. You've got to learn to forgive, which is a huge thing, class. And I don't have time to dwell on this anymore. I'll just tell you that as we fill in the blanks here, Adam and Eve were created different. Number two, the results, and I just told you about the results. Men are masculine, women are feminine. What does that mean? Does that mean that we're different? Has God created us different? And you know, maybe this is a part of where we are in our day and time now when we will not identify our masculinity and our femininity, and which complements each other, by the way. Maybe that's part of the problem. There are some books that are written, and here are some of the titles. Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, by Dr. Gray. Any of you familiar with that book? Dr. Dobson wrote a book called Whatever Woman Wishes Her Husband Knew About Women. Gary Smalley wrote a book called If Only He Knew. In fact, I have given this book out. This is one of the books that I recommend for guys who come to see me when there's issues, because Gary Smalley in his book, If Only He Knew, it was one of the first books. I bet I encouraged probably 200 couples to read this book. By the way, when I was in Post Falls, I probably spent 3,500 hours in the time that I was there counseling with couples. And this was one of the first books that I encouraged them to read. So, what we have to agree is that God has created us different, right? The harder we work to be alike, the more frustrating it becomes. Would you agree to that? Okay. Some of you are just not real sure. Okay. We know that, for instance, I encourage couples this, that opposites attract. You can write this down. This is not in your notes. You can write it down if you want to. And what I find in almost every couple, there's a passive person and an aggressive person. There's usually a clamor, someone who clams up, and somebody who blows up. Both of those, by the way, are condemned according to Ephesians chapter 4. Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth. That's the blow up. And don't let the sun set on your wrath. That's the clam up. We try to help people learn how to communicate with one another. Now, in what Paul says, and this is number 2, Paul's description, Ephesians 5:33, is that he says, husbands, hate your wives. Right? No. Well, what does he say anyway? Husbands, what? Love your wives. And guys, we're going to, somewhere along the line, we're going to talk about how important it is for you to love your wife. You want her to be romantic with you, then you make her feel loved and safe. Don't expect her to have sex with you whenever you have just yelled at her, or you criticized her in public, or you made her angry or put her down. Those are ungodly things. So, and I believe that we have generational sin involved. You want to write that down? You can. Because here's the truth, class. You're going to model in your relationship with your spouse what you saw modeled in your own family. You're going to live out your relationship in your life just like what was given to you by your mom and dad. Modeling is the biggest influence in our life. We all bring a paradigm with us when we come to get married. If a girl was raised in a home where her mom was the person who directed traffic and made all the decisions, and she marries a fella whose dad was the person who was in charge at their home, they're going to have big problems. I'm a good example of that. My wife's mother was, she was the spokesperson because she had been married to a pastor at one time. My wife's dad was a pastor. He died when she was 4. There were 4 kids. My wife's mother became the spiritual leader of the whole family. She married a guy who could not make a decision if he was in a hailstorm. And so when she and I got married, my dad was a tyrant. My mom would bring my dad a cup of coffee. It had to be boiling hot, about 1/3 cream, and 2 spoons of sugar. If it was not right, she had to take it back and do it all over again. When my wife and I got married, I said, "Are you going to bring me some coffee?" She said, "Why should I do that? Aren't you quite capable of getting your own coffee?" I said, "Well, now wait a minute. My mom did that for us because she loved us." She says, "It has nothing to do with love." And turned around and walked away. Gosh, the things we went through. And you know, we only been married 53 years. We just celebrated last week our 53rd anniversary. And we still have some intense fellowship every once in a while. I am just about to get her straightened out, but it's taken me a little while. In John Eldredge's book, Wild at Heart, girls, you need to hear this. If you haven't read John Eldredge's book, or your husband hasn't read John Eldredge's book, then you need to read this, because he says that men are conquerors and they need something to conquer. I tell every gal, be sure to make your husband your hero. In Ephesians 5:33, what Paul says, husbands, love your wives, and wives, see to it that they respect their husband. Now, gals, you got to hear this. This is from the design of God as much as anything that I know. If you want to encourage your husband, if you want to make him the man that he needs to be in God's eyes, then you make a hero out of him. If he does not feel like that he's honored in his home, he will not be energetic about anything, or he will go overboard in trying to correct and criticize and all kinds of things. Now, if you have questions about that, you can see Laura, she'll answer all those questions.
Set up an appointment that you can talk to Charlie.
She does all my appointments. Now the next page, let's go to the reality of this. Here's the reality, class. Conflict is as necessary as anything in our life. It's how we set boundaries. If you were raised in a home where your mom and dad never fought, you never heard them fight, you never heard them resolve an issue, you are in big trouble. Because you will more than likely marry somebody whose family processed conflict by yelling and screaming and being outwardly assertive. Conflict will scare you to death, but it's necessary. It's the only way that I know you can set boundaries. Isn't that right, Maggie? Maggie, do you like conflict? See, can I use you guys here for a little bit? I know Maggie and Doug, and so I wanted to warn them that I was going to pick on them. Doug's family processed frustration by talking it out, by getting it out in the open and dealing with it. And reminds me of Crocodile Dundee when his girlfriend went to Australia and brought him over to America. And she took him to her dad's place, big party. She introduced him to this gal, and as they walked away, he asked, "What did that gal do?" And she said, "She's a shrink." And he asked, "What do shrinks do?" And so, I'm sorry, Tony, I'm moving out of the picture here. And so she said, well, people come tell her their issues, problems, and she helps them figure out what their problems are, and everything's okay. And so she asked Dundee, how do they resolve problems in Walkabout Creek? And he says, well, everybody goes down to the pub, tells Wally all their issues. Wally goes and spreads it all over town, and it's out in the open, and they deal with it, and they never have problems anymore. The reality is there's a lot of truth to that. Unless you are willing to deal with conflict, if you want to withdraw into yourself, and you are a person who's passive, maybe passive-aggressive, because if you aren't talking to each other about your issues, you will talk to somebody else about it, and then you will start to gather all kinds of frustration. Now, how many of you girls are passive? Would you say you're passive? 2, that's all? 3? All right. All right, now what are you going to get for? Okay. So how many of you girls would say you're assertive? All right. So how many of you girls have a husband who's passive? Isn't that interesting? See, we're going to have a great time in here because so you guys are going to figure out some things about yourself that I think will be good for you. Now, conflict, helps us set boundaries. It's the only way that I know of that we can set boundaries. And the frustrating part, and I hear this from girls all the time, wives who like to work through things, he won't ever talk to me. How come? Well, he pouts. When a conflict comes up and I try to work through it with him, he just goes off and pouts and watches TV. I used to do that too. In fact, I could manipulate my mom with that. But when I married my wife, as you've already guessed, she didn't pay any attention to me. I'd go by and pick something and, hey, you notice I'm still angry? And, okay, big deal, get over it. Here you are, where you need to be, so get over it. That was not easy for me. And so when we couldn't resolve issues, we had our own set of problems. Conflict is the process of refinement. That's what Emerson Eckert suggests, and I believe it's true. It's the way God prepares us for glory. You cannot have a relationship without there's conflict. You are living in a fantasy world if you feel like you're going to live in a relationship where there is no conflict. Now, hopefully, you're mature enough to be able to talk about it and work through it, but there's always conflict. See, it provides security in your children. Tell me how you think that conflict is going to provide security in your children.
See resolution.
That's it. See, if they hear their mom and dad fight, kids are going to sit back and go. But eventually, they understand that mom and dad finally make up, and it's okay. It's okay for me to disagree. Because I see how they worked it out. Now, when you have one person who says, I'm not arguing with you, you're making me angry, and so when I get angry, it's just going to get worse, and so I'm going to withdraw. Well, big deal. Let me share something with you really quick. This is what I call the circle of communication. I'm going to have to do this real quickly. When an incident happens and you become angry, you have to do something. You have to do something with the anger. And here's what a lot of us do. We bury the anger away right here. If that's your process of dealing with anger, then the deal is that this thing is full of stuff that you've never dealt with before. There are all kinds of relationships and conflicts that you've never really dealt with before. This what I call the hurt sack is full of stuff that's been there since you were a kid. Because you do one of three things. When a conflict comes, you either take flight and run away, or you stand and fight and work it out, or you freeze. One of those F's. Now, tell me, some of you give me an idea where you are. How many of you take flight? Okay. Only honest person in here. Now, what's your first name? Luke. Luke? Yep. Thanks, Luke. Appreciate it. Is your wife?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. What's your first name?
Jessica.
Jessica? Okay. Now, can I ask you guys a personal question? You know, I don't ever try to embarrass anybody, but I do like to ask questions. Does he ever withdraw? Yeah. And how do you like that?
I didn't know about it for a really long time.
Really? You didn't tell her, Luke?
No, I flew away.
You took flight?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, class, let me help you understand this. If that's what you do and you bury that away, Luke, I can almost guarantee that's how you've done most of your relationships in your life. Somebody makes you angry, you run away. So why would it be normal when you marry somebody to do the same thing? And this is where the disconnect starts right here, class. Whenever you can't work out conflict, then you start to withdraw from each other. You start to pull away because I got my feelings hurt, she doesn't really care. Just doesn't seem to be sensitive. She knows I'm mad because I withdrew and went and watched TV. Well, gosh, you know, big deal. What was she thinking when you went and watched TV? You should have been man enough to stand up. That's what she's thinking, or what he's thinking. Now, here's the bottom line. The scripture is very explicit about this. We have to confront, lovingly confront. We have to work at forgiveness. And then the cycle keeps going, class. This will be the last time you'll ever be upset. You're going to get mad again. You're going to get angry again. And you have to decide right here what you're going to do with the frustration. Does that make sense? Hello?
Yes.
Hello, is this on? Hello. Everybody agree? Okay, as long as you agree. If you don't agree, then Laura will fix it for you. Here's the influence. The influence, as I told you before, is modeling. B, generational sin. Exodus chapter 20, verses 4 through 6 says, God will visit the sins of the father to the third and fourth generation. Now, let me ask you, remind me your name again.
Jessica.
Jessica, was your mom a confronter?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you ever act like your mom?
All the time.
Okay. Now, Luke, was your dad a confronter?
Probably not.
Bingo! See, that's what I'm talking about right there. We figured that out right off the bat. So when you guys leave today, you'll have everything all figured out, and your marriage will be fine from today on. Is that right? Okay, Jessica, you heard that. So Luke has got to learn to share his feelings. What I usually do is I give couples a tennis ball, and I encourage them. I want you to take the tennis ball and put it on your spouse's chest, and remind them when you lay the tennis ball on their chest, they have to tell you what's going on in there. Luke, you got to learn to talk about your feelings. Jessica, you got to quit being in control. Now, I just solved all your guys' problems. If you can figure that out, you're going to have a great marriage. Here's what happens. In fact, C is a lack of humility and grace. Jesus, according to John 1:14, came full of grace and truth. We bring our paradigms with us. We bring baggage with us. And what we just described is the baggage that we bring. And trying to work that out, class, you got to hear this. Trying to work this out is how God prepares us for glory. Isn't that wonderful? If I can learn to forgive, and if I quit insisting on my own way, if I quit being so bossy, if I quit trying to tell my spouse what to do and make suggestions, choose my words specifically, then my relationship is going to become a whole lot better. In fact, under this, we become, instead of became, we become like our examples. How many of you in here feel like that you came into this relationship expecting it to be like what you grew up with? Hello? Okay. And how many of you came into this relationship that you have with your spouse expecting it to be just like your mom and dad's relationship? And when did you wake up and smell the coffee? When did reality set in? Jessica, you and Luke have kids? How long have you guys been married?
7 years.
7 years. I'd love to visit with you guys, right? Now you got my curiosity off. Well, Jesus must become our paradigm. Romans 8:29 says that from the very beginning, God has determined that we should be conformed to His image. Oh, gosh, we just get started and it's time to quit. I believe that, and I want to share this with you, that I'm going to pray. When you leave this class, you're going to know how to have a relationship that's designed of God. What I want you to remember is that God expects you to help share with other folks what you've already learned. 2 Corinthians 1:3 and 4 says, the God of all comfort comforts us with all His comfort, so that we can comfort others with the same comfort we have received. I just talked to Lori Brock on Texas this week. I don't know if you guys remember Lori. She was our accountant here for a while. She and Mr. Brock. Is it time to quit? Nope. Oh, okay. She and Bob came here, and their marriage was a mess. She wouldn't even look at him. When they were in my office, she hated him so bad she couldn't look at him. And I said to both of them, you know, you guys are not here in this area. They came from back east. You're not here by chance. God has brought you here to help bring healing to your relationship. And here's the other part. When he does that, you're going to owe him. Now, this last week, I got a text from Lori, and Bob was back in Washington or New York, I guess, and he met Brett Bauer. If any of you watch Fox News, you know who Brett Bauer is. Met him and his wife, and then Greta, the other gal that used to be one of the commentators on Fox News. And I said to her, I hear that you guys have already found a couple that you're working with. And she said, this old guy in North Idaho told us that we had to help other couples. And of course I laughed, and we both laughed at that. And then I quoted that verse to her, 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4, and she said, indeed, we got it. You guys are going to be responsible for helping other couples who are going through some of the same stuff that you are. I'm glad you're here. We're going to have fun. Hopefully before this is over with, we're going to have some testimonies by folks that are people that you will readily recognize or know of or whatever, who God is working in their life and on their relationship. And my prayer is that you will stop insisting on things being the way it's always been, because here's the bottom line: if it was working the way it's going, you probably wouldn't be in my class. Some things need to work better. And the only way they work better is you got to be honest with yourself. You got to be looking at yourself and asking God, what do you want me to be? Not what do I want to be, what you want me to be. Let me pray. Father, we are always blessed. Understand that you designed us, you made us, you have every hair on our head counted, you know every cell in our body. You have every hair on our head numbered. You have all the tears that we cried in a bottle. You know us. You know what our needs are. You created us by design so that we could have a wonderful relationship. Now, Lord, as we go through these next few weeks, help us to understand how to apply grace, forgiveness, understanding, and to begin to be more like Jesus than the persons who model for us what relationships we're supposed to be like. So, Lord, I just pray you take my feeble words, but the powerful words that you have given to us, and mold us in your design. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for coming, and we will see you same time, same station next week. Any questions?
I